A quick statement before the show starts. We originally recorded all of our end of year lists all in one go, but the length of the show was almost 2.5 hours, so I thought I should split it into two. So what you're about to listen to in this first half is just our list of our favourite new releases of 2024. So enjoy. Hello and welcome to the Blueprint Review podcast, our monthly show. We're looking at a range of films, new or old, popular or obscure, focusing largely on physical media, much like the site itself. For this episode, we're going to move away from our usual format, though, if we ever actually had one. I kind of keep changing mine. And we're going to take a look back at 2024. So we're doing it a little later than a lot of people. I think a lot of sites kind of jump in there even before the year is totally ended, but I like to give myself a couple of weeks just to catch up on a few titles and things, and I've been busy as well with stuff, so we're going for it now. But yeah, before we dig in, let's just see who's here. So yeah, I'm David Brooke, Blueprint Reviews editor. With me tonight are three regulars to the show. Well, everyone's been on at least one show anyway. So we've got Leon Vegas.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me on. I always have a blast on here.
No worries. We have Andy Goulding.
Hello, good to be back.
Yep. And Justin Richards.
Hi, mate.
Hello. So I thought before we start going into a list, because the idea today is to do a few lists of favourites of the year. But first I thought, just briefly, kind of what are your general thoughts on 2024 in terms of kind of films? Do you think it's been a good, strong year for films, a weak year, kind of an unusual year? What are your kind of thoughts?
Who wants to start first? I'll go first.
Oh, you can jump in there.
I'll go first. I thought it was a pretty stellar year, honestly. Like, obviously, like every year we have some like hits and misses. There were some duds this year that I didn't like, but I think I came away from this year enjoying like a considerable amount more films, enjoying the films considerably more than like the past couple of years or so. Like, there were so many great films that, I mean, my honorable lists mention, or like films that I'm gonna like mention for honorable, it's like I think it might even be longer than my top 10. I'm just gonna blitz from because it was that good of a year. So no, I think it was an excellent year for film.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, I kind of keep tabs on everything I watch. I'm super geeky. I have big lists of everywhere. And I watched, in terms of like new releases, I've got down, I didn't watch a huge because I watch a lot of older stuff. I watched like 52 new releases this year. And to be honest, like you go down to like the mid 30s, and there are still some kind of like 4-star films in there that I liked quite a lot. Even my bottom few, the ones at the bottom are just films I watched with the kids, like animated ones, and even then they weren't that bad. They were just like a bit like middling. So I wasn't really super disappointed with anything. I mean, I didn't watch loads, but I was pleased with this year.
Yeah, I had real trouble paring my list down, actually. That was and in my honourable mentions, I've got quite a few ones that will be like high up in a lot of people's top 10s, I think, and my runners up as well. So I and there's quite a few that I still haven't seen, big films like Anora and stuff like that, that still not got round to. So I'm quite glad I haven't seen them, actually, because I think it would have squeezed things out of my top 10 that I quite like having in there.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think we'll get to the top 10s later, but mine's got a few of the films that were kind of up for awards and ththings last year. So it feels like they've been talked about and lauded a long time ago, but for me, they were 2024 releases for me. So I know what you mean. How about you, Justin? Did you have a good year at the cinema this year?
Well, to be honest, this last year, 2024, was a bit of a disaster for me for film watching, because I had a longer list of films I wanted to see and missed, and actually got around to watching, particularly at the cinema. But I think it was a pretty decent year, because obviously you had the writers' strike, you had a lot of issues within the film industry in general, but they still managed to squeeze out quite a lot of good stuff. I think it was surprisingly okay, actually, considering all the things which were going on behind the scenes. So I think there was some good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, without further ado, then, because I'm aware we're going to probably into quite a bit of time tonight. Let's talk about our top 10 new releases. So these are films that kind of came out in 2024, at least in the UK, or at least that you saw. I've got a few cheeky ones that I saw early. I get to see some films early through kind of work and some of the things I'm involved with. After you watch them, they keep saying, "Oh, you're not allowed to talk. I'm under embargo." But I'm like, "Oh, it was a few months ago. Some of them are out. They've been out at film festivals, so I'm going to be like, I don't care. I'm going to talk about." So, but anyway, so what I thought we should do, rather than do, I was kind of umming and ahhing about the best way of doing this. I think what might be a nice idea is if we run through the back ends at first, so 10 till 6 each in a row, and then we'll do the kind of top fives after that. I'll kick things off, I guess. So my number 10 is a late entry for me. I actually watched this just last week, but it technically just came out in 2024, so I'm going to add it to the list. And that's Conclave.
Nice.
Yeah, so as I said, I'm not trying not to talk too much about each entry, but yeah, Conclave, just a really, really solid film. Great performances. This story just gripping from start to finish. Just really quality film. The only slight thing that bothered me is without wanting to give it away, there's a kind of a last minute twist that's thrown in there that it felt a bit kind of hot topic for me, and it was a little bit, it made me cringe a little bit. I kind of felt it didn't need that, but otherwise the film is absolutely spot on. I really, really, really enjoyed it. Okay, number 9. This is one of the cheeky ones that's not out yet, but I got to see it and I loved it, so I wanted to put it in there, and that's Flow. So yeah, this is an animated film, a beautiful animated film. It's got quite an unusual style. It's actually made on Blender, which is like a free 3D graphics software, which is absolutely crazy because it looks incredible. And it's just a beautiful, quite a unique film. There's no dialogue. It just follows these animals around on this kind of adventure, and it's glorious. And you've got to see it on a big screen if you can. It's pretty stunning. Next is, and I know this is on a couple of other lists because I've actually seen some of your lists, and that is The Substance. Yeah, it's such a wild ride. It is mad. It pushed the envelope a little far for me at times. I was getting a bit I can get quite squeamish, as some of you guys know, and I was a bit like, I was struggling, but I still had a blast with it. And it's not subtle, but it's so much fun. Especially that final act, it's like bonkers. So yeah, I had to have it in the list. No other film kind of like whacked me around the face as much as that did, really. And following that is a completely different film, and this is one that went quite under the radar. I saw an early screening of it, but it's been out now, I think. I don't know if it played in cinemas, but it's definitely out on I think the BFI or something like that, streaming service. And that's That They May Face the Rising Sun. It's a literary adaptation of, I don't have the details, I've forgotten who wrote it, but it's an incredibly kind of gentle film of just it follows there's a middle-aged couple living in a rural island, and the man is a writer, and his wife is an artist. It's been a while since I've seen it. I'm trying to remember the details, I might be wrong. And it's just they're living right out in the sticks. It's set in the 70s as well, I believe, in Ireland, and it just kind of follows their lives. It's very gentle, kind of quiet film. A lot of the joy of it comes from the neighbors. The neighbors, almost everyone, most of the other people in the village are quite elderly. It's a bit of a dying community, really, because everyone's moving away to the city for bigger and brighter opportunities. So a lot of the film is these kind of lonely old geezers and ladies coming over to visit for a cup of tea, and it's just the interactions are really beautiful, and the film it's just kind of a quiet kind of ode to life and kind of communities and things, and I just found it incredibly beautiful. It's very slow moving, but I was just hooked. I absolutely loved it. That's definitely one that's not getting enough attention. And then number 6 is again, sorry, this is the last one, but a cheeky one that is not out yet. And I don't know if it's got a proper release, which is very sad. Hopefully it does get picked up. And that's called On Falling. And this is again very subtle kind of film. It's all about this woman she's a Portuguese immigrant. She's moved to Scotland and she's working in a warehouse. It's kind of Amazon, but it's not officially Amazon. But it's pretty much that. She's picking things from online orders, and so she's a picker. And the film is just about loneliness, really. And it's just about she's and her kind of struggles with this, and kind of isolation and alienation. Like in a job, she's just kind of just doing her own little thing. She tries to chat to people she works with, and it's just really awkward and uncomfortable. And with the kind of, I mean, she speaks English, but she's in a totally new country, and it's just about that. And it's such it's so delicately done. It's really, really beautiful. It's very there's incredibly moving. There's some of the bits near the end was just, yeah, it's kind of, it hits you hard without the film doing anything kind of big and dramatic. There aren't any hugely melodramatic moments, but it just hits you anyway. It's a really, really beautiful film. So I'm hoping that gets a more of a release. I know it played at the London Film Festival and probably a few other festivals here and there, but I'm hoping it gets more of a release. So yeah, that's my 6. I probably talked more than I should have done, but I don't care.
No, that's a great list.
So we'll go, Andy, what is the back end of your top 10?
Right, okay, well, my number 10 is the Netflix documentary Will and Harper, which was released about Will Ferrell going on a road trip with the former Saturday Night Live writer Harper Steele, who had just come out to him as a trans woman, and they go across the country, and a lot of it is just them talking about identity, talking about Will Ferrell's encouraged to ask lots of questions, and it just felt like the right film for this time. They really get into the subject on a really nice sort of personal level, and it doesn't shy away from some quite unpleasant things either. There's one scene where they go to this restaurant together in I can't remember where they are, but it's not one of the more progressive states, I think, and they get an unpleasant reaction. It's not helped that Will Ferrell goes dressed as Sherlock Holmes and draws a lot of attention to them. But, it's really interesting to see Will Ferrell as himself, because he's so far from the characters he usually plays that it's really interesting. And Kristen Wiig as a sort of basically amounts to a cameo, but she manages to steal the whole film with this brilliant little epilogue at the end. So I just really love that film. So that made it into my number 10. Number 9 is Kneecap. It's a film that I didn't know anything about the band. If I'd seen the film on its own, I would have thought they're a fictional band, except for the fact that the music is pretty amazing. I was really impressed by the music, but the film itself, the band play themselves, and they're really good. I would have taken them for actors if I hadn't read up on it, and it's not just like any old sort of music biopic. It's filled with all these details about like sort of Irish politics, identity. A lot of it is in the Irish language, and I just thought it was a really fantastic film. It's been compared to Trainspotting a lot, which is quite a lazy comparison, but it's not unfounded. It has that sort of energy behind it, and yeah, I just really loved it. Number 8, same as David, The Substance. Made it onto my list. I was really not sure, because I'm not the biggest horror guy. I was really not sure going into it whether it was going to appeal to me, but I just loved it. And I looked at the runtime and I was a bit skeptical about that. Absolutely flew by. I just couldn't believe it how quickly it went. I think some of the bits that might have turned David off were maybe some of my favourite bits. I really it got just really, really foul.
It's the kind of real medical body kind of
yeah.
Like, oh.
Without revealing too much, there's one scene where Demi Moore spent a lot of it with her mouth sort of stuck wide open, and it was always you could always feel it. I was always choking along with her. And like the night I said I was going to watch it, David sent me a message and said, "Good luck with that. It ain't subtle, but you'll have a good time." And he was right. But I think it knows it's not subtle. It's not aiming for subtlety, and that becomes a sort of artful subtlety of its own, I think. So yeah, I couldn't deny it. I had to go on the list.
I can always remember when when I saw it at the cinema. It was the screen unseen thing they do at the Odeon, where it's a mystery film. So people going into the cinema wasn't quite sure what they're up for, and there were a couple of walkouts. It's not going to be for everyone. But what I loved was when the film finished, there was a guy sat next to me, and he was just like, "Whoa!" And he turned around to his mate. He says, "I don't know if that was the worst or the best film I've ever seen." And I thought that was perfect. I think
yeah. So yeah, my number 7 is Jeff Nichols' film The Bike Riders, which I really enjoyed. I'd heard a lot of people, there was a lot of buzz around it, and then a lot of people when it came out said, "Oh, it's not very good. It meanders a lot. There's not a lot of plot." And But to me, that was all part of it. I know it's based on a photo book, and it gets inside that kind of that feel for me in the way that it's not a rigid plot. You just get to sort of hang out with these bikers, and a lot of people had issues with the performances as well. I really liked the performances, really enjoyed it. So I'm quite a fan of Jeff Nichols. And a lot of the time his films are sort of go under the wire a bit. So yeah, I was really impressed by that one. So
Huge
yeah,
fan of
like
Take
that.
Shelter. I don't know if you've seen that one. But
I watched it the other day for the first time and thought it was great. Yeah,
amazing.
It was one of my first watches of this year, actually, and it will probably end up on my best first watches of this year at the end. We'll see when we'll reconvene at the end of this year.
Yeah, I liked the bike riders a lot too. It didn't make my top 10, but it's I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it a lot. And
my number 6 on is another Netflix documentary, Daughters. This has got quite a lot of Oscar buzz as well, and it's just stuff about kids and parenthood and stuff just always absolutely slays me. And it's a really moving documentary. It's co-directed by the activist who initiated the program for incarcerated men, where they get to have a daddy-daughter dance. So children come in to the prison, they have this coordinated daddy-daughter dance, and part of the process is they have to undergo this 30-day parenting course. So a lot of the film is showing them in those group sessions talking about their daughters. It doesn't get into what the men did and why they're there, which I think is really crucial. You don't need those details. But so you just see the girls preparing for the dance and the dads preparing for the dance, and you see the dance itself, and then you see the aftermath. And so it's a fairly simple setup, but it's a really beautiful film. It's so full of emotion, and I really hope it wins the best not the best picture Oscar, the best documentary Oscar. But I think it adds sort of the variety. It had it as the favorite for a while, but I think it's just been replaced in their final predictions. But I'm sure it'll get a nomination, and I think hopefully that will boost the amount of people who watch it.
Yeah.
Cool. Justin, how about you?
Well, you probably have to take my rankings with a bit of pinch of salt, because I haven't given this a lot of thought. I wasn't sure if I was going to do this or not. And as I said, I was quite limited with what I saw. That was new releases and stuff. But probably my most controversial choice, let's stick it in number 10, is the remake of The Crow. Because I enjoyed that a lot more than I thought I was going to do, because I went in with zero expectations and probably thought I'd end up hating it, because the Brandon Lee film is one of my favorites. And then I thought, actually, this isn't so bad. Once I got into it and realized it's not the same film, it's something of its own, I just went along for the ride and quite enjoyed it. And the last quarter in particular is quite strong, whereas it takes its time. I mean, it's over long. It's got a lot of faults, but I did quite enjoy it, and I liked some of the visual style of it. And there's some very, very over top violence towards the end in a theatre, which made me chuckle a few times.
That's a great pick. Sorry, I hope I'm not interrupting. I actually enjoyed The Crow quite a bit too. I wasn't like head over heels with it, but because I discovered the original Brandon Lee one really, really early last year for the first time, and then a couple months later got to see it on the big screen for the anniversary and fell in love with it. So I was very like, I don't know about this, but no, I was really surprised. I think, like you said, great visual style. I really liked FK Twigs and Bill Skarsgård, and I thought they both gave great performances. I think people were way too harsh on it because of the legacy of that original film. And no, I'm glad to see that get a mention, even though it wouldn't have made my list. I think it was a good film and very, very overhated.
Yeah, no, I agree. One I didn't see at the cinema, but I saw on Netflix, which was one of their new releases, which again was one I really didn't think I was going to like, but enjoyed a lot more, was Beverly Hills Cop Axel F, because I thought this is going to be rubbish. I enjoyed it. It was kind of like it had a real sort of 80s, early 90s vibe to it. People looked like they were actually enjoying themselves. Eddie Murphy looked like he was having a blast. And it was quite nice to see some of the other key character actors in there as well. So, Yeah, it was just fun. It was and it was well made. And obviously, it had quite a sizable budget. The amount of cars and scenery they chewed up and blew up and destroyed, and it just reminded me of going back to the cinema in the 80s and 90s, really. So I kind of, again, it was a surprise. I just enjoyed, but I sort of caught it on Netflix. So probably more.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it as well. It's like it didn't blow me away, but it's when you see one of those reboots and they're all right, it's that exceeds my expectations. So yeah, I enjoyed it too.
I mean, it's true that I'm easily pleased. So number 7, I'm probably going to go with Alien Romulus, because although it didn't do anything original, I thought it was very well made, and it was amazing world building. And it was quite nice to see kind of some younger actors getting in on the scene with an Alien franchise. So, I quite enjoyed it. It was a pleasant surprise. I wasn't expecting much from it. And there was some generally quite sort of tense scenes, particularly with the facehuggers chasing them down the corridor and stuff like that. So, yeah, I would say that was well worth a look. And I'm hoping they don't do too many more, because I think they're kind of running out of ideas and steam. But it was a solid entry, I thought. I mean, it wasn't reinventing the wheel, but it was I think they must have, a bit like the first Star Wars fan of the last trilogy.
Definitely.
It felt like it was ticking lots of boxes to please fans.
It kind of felt like a greatest hits sort of thing for me. So I'm the same. Yeah, definitely. It was like I enjoyed it, but it did feel a bit like it was just kind of ticking boxes. But it was fun, so I can't deny I didn't enjoy myself. So it's I'm happy to see it mentioned.
Another film I didn't think I was going to like particularly was the remake of Salem's Lot.
I didn't realize that.
But actually, it turned out to be quite good. And there's a couple of sequences in there that are very well done, particularly the drive-in sequence. I don't want to ruin it for you. I haven't seen it, but they try to do something different where all the vampires kind of appear and attack the hero and his sort of hangers on, and so that was, I thought, was well done. It didn't reinvent the wheel with the Stephen King original, but they did. I think they did try to stick a little bit closer to the book than the previous go around. I'm still a big fan of the Toby Hooper original miniseries, and for me that kind of left Festival standing. But no, I thought it was a good effort. It was, I enjoyed the performances, and I thought the vampires were quite well realised. So yeah, I thought it was a decent effort. Cool. And number 6, if you want to, is a Polish film I saw with Isabella, because she's Polish, and it was Corpus Christi. I don't know whether you've heard of that one. It's basically about a guy who's been, shall we say, accused of murder, and so he then pretends to be a priest to kind of avoid the authorities, and he ends up ministering for a small community with some interesting, shall we say, effects on his flock. So yeah, but it was just quirky, a bit different. And I've seen quite a lot of Polish films, since I started dating a Polish lady, and I'm always impressed with the quality of Polish cinema. The filmmaking is very good, the acting is very good, and I've started watching quite a few sort of Polish mini series and stuff like that, and they're all very well made, really. So they're all pleasantly surprising, Cool. So that's me for now. So I guess it's over to Leon.
Oh, nice. Okay, so I'll try not to talk too much because I get I talk a lot. So number 10, like Andy, Kneecap. I was absolutely blown away by it, and I think the one thing that disappointed me was just the fact I didn't go and see it in the cinema, and I saw it advertised on Amazon Prime, and I was like, oh, I'll give this a shot, and I was just like, oh, why didn't I go and see this? Absolutely, incredibly fun ride from start to finish. Again, like you, Andy, I wasn't really familiar familiar with the group or anything beforehand, but the music they make's quite excellent. And like you said, it's got a lot of it goes in a lot of different directions. It's kind of a biopic, although from what I've read, they purposely they made it as fictionalized as possible to just make it absurd almost, which I really, really like. It's like making the most inaccurate biopic about yourself that you also star in. I find that absolutely hilarious. And yeah, it has that, like you said, the train spotting kind of energy without it getting super bleak and like dour, like Danny Boyle's Train Spotting does. But yeah, no, just great music, excellent, vibrant and energetic direction. And yeah, no, I'm really happy that it seems to be finding its audience now. I just kick myself in the head for not seeing it sooner, but I think they're in with a potential shot for best international feature or best original song, which would be amazing at the Academy Awards. So yeah, no, that's my number 10. Number 9 is a documentary that nobody's really seen, and I wish it had easier distribution. And that is the documentary Bray Wyatt Becoming Immortal. It's a wrestling documentary that is available on the US WWE Network streaming service and Peacock, which is how I accessed it through a VPN, unfortunately. I don't think it has a UK release yet, but I really hope it gets one. And I'm counting it anyway because it just had such an impact on me. I'm not a huge... I'm not someone who I'd say is huge into wrestling necessarily, but I've got a lot of friends who are, and a few years ago, the wrestler Bray Wyatt passed away, and he was kind of an up-and-comer, really, really notorious in the scene. Everyone loved him, had nothing negative to say about him, just kind words. And yeah, early last year, a documentary came out chronicling his rise and his interest in the wrestling community, wrestling world, I should say. It's about 2 hours long, but it's never boring. There's some really great kind of never before seen footage, and it's very eye-opening and just kind of shows you I don't know, just an incredible look at a life that was cut too short. And I will say the last 20 minutes were particularly hard to get through. There were some tears. I found it really, really emotionally just kind of devastating, and it's something that I'm just praying somebody releases over here at some point. But if you can get your hands on it or something, I highly recommend it. I hope it gets a Blu-ray of some kind, or even a DVD. I want to own this physically because nobody's talking about it, and I do really think it's one of the best documentaries I've seen this decade. Really, it's really well made as well as just being a super compelling story. Cool. Number 8 is Yorgos Lanthimos' Kinds of Kindness. I was going to put Poor Things on here, and for a long time, Poor Things, even though I know that was a 2023 film, we got it in January. So I was gonna have that on my 2024 list because I was absolutely blown away by it. But yeah, he just kind of shadow dropped this a few months after, in it must have been May or something, May or June, and I was just blown away by it. An insanely divisive film. I know some people came out of this thinking it was overlong, pretentious, really, really try hard and edgy. Other people came away from it absolutely loving it. I'm one of those people. It's a almost 3-hour long anthology comedy, dark comedy, I guess, surrealist dark comedy, which follows, there's 3 different stories in it, but the gimmick of the film is that the cast is reused for each segment. So you've got Emma Stone, Willem Dafoe, Jesse Plemons, Hong Chow, there's a few other actors who I'm completely blanking on, but it's just a cast of about 6 or 7 actors, and they're reused in each of the anthology segments, and each one just gets more and more bizarre and just out there and wild. If you've seen some of Yorgos's earlier stuff like Dogtooth and The Lobster, you kind of know what you're in for. It's not as saying that Poor Things and The Favourite are mainstream is silly because those films are so absurd, but it is really going into that kind of sicko territory in a lot of ways, and it's a film that makes you feel bad for enjoying and laughing at it. That's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, this. So I was just gonna say, it missed out on my top 10. I'd say this year's been so strong, but I loved it. It's in my top 20 at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think my only thing that held me back was that it did feel a bit long, but I find that with a lot of anthology films. I think because you get into one story, then end, and you have to start another one, it makes it quite tiring, kind of long, but it is stunning. It did, like you say, it reminded me of the early of his early work, which I love. A Dogtooth, I adore Dogtooth. So it's I'm with you on that. I'm really glad to see that made somebody's list.
I'm going to be honest. I started it. And I got tired because I'd started it quite late at night, and I watched the whole first segment. I thought, this is interesting. I'll go back to that as soon as I feel in the headspace again. And I haven't been in the headspace again.
It is brutal. It's pretty heavy going. It's it's funny, but it's brutal at the same time.
It is.
And it does not get easier in the later stories.
No. The first segment is like the lightest, and it just gets more and more like depraved from there. But if you can finish it at some point, I highly recommend it. It's a blast, even though it's a lot.
I'll definitely go back. I just need to. I don't know how to get to that place where
I guess I watched it at the cinema where you're trapped. It's like,
yes. My number 7. I'm so happy. Like, I'm beyond happy that I can even say this as a UK release, and I pray that my piece for it on Blueprint helped in some way, and that is the throwback, no budget indie silent comedy, Hundreds of Beavers.
Not to give anything away, but hooray!
Yes, I think it might be in some more lists.
I have a feeling it's going to crack some, because it's just one of the most like infectiously entertaining films I've seen all decade. I was lucky enough, I reached out to some of the producers, but for the film, and I was like, hey, can I cover this, because it had no UK distribution, and thankfully they sent me a screener, covered it on Blueprint, and then I don't know, like, I don't want to say, oh, I'm responsible, because that's just really like pretentious, but like, I did in my section, I did say, hey, one of these labels should pick it up, and one of them was Lightbulb Film Distribution. A month later, they picked it up and gave it a theatrical release. I don't know if they saw my post, but I do know they follow me on social media, so I'm just like, if I helped, I feel very happy, because that film is just incredible. So it's made for like virtually like a very small budget. I'd say less than 100 grand maybe, and it's just from these up and coming filmmakers. They did a film a few years ago called Lake Michigan Monster, which had a very similar kind of I say that one has more of like an Adult Swim-esque like sense of humor, but this one, it's just about it's just basically a throwback to silent comedy from like yesteryear and everything. It's got like the beaver costume is incredible, and basically it's just a series of I guess it's kind of a video gamey inspired film of sorts, where it's like a guy is stuck and he needs to progress, but these beavers are in his way, and they're just causing havoc no matter what he wants to do. So he has to kind of like level up in order to take down the beavers and win the heart of this merchant's daughter, who he doesn't like him, but he really likes the merchant's daughter. It's just absolutely hilarious. When it got the theatrical release over here, it had like a one night only screening. I saw it in a sold out crowd, and I was like, no, everyone loved it. I don't think there was a single person there having a bad time. It's just absolutely hilarious. It's like DIY filming at its finest, really. It's like, it just goes to show, it's like, you don't need like millions of dollars to make something fun. You just need a couple of friends. You just need the passion, really, and that's it. It's just, they're filming in the woods. They've got some green screen, like really like silly beaver costume that's just like, it's great. I feel like I'm rambling, but it's kind of fitting for Hundreds of Beavers. Hundreds of Beavers is just kind of absolutely bonkers from start to finish. Amazing film. Loved it.
It's got like a live action cartoon kind of vibe going on as well. But
yes,
it's definitely not the last you've heard of that film. We'll have to say that.
Oh, I'm very excited to hear like whoever's got it on their list. And then number 6, The Substance, which has made a few people's lists already. It initially was higher, but I was like moving around films, and I was like, actually, I think I like some of these a little bit more. But no, The Substance, amazing. One of the few films I saw twice at the cinema this year. I saw it, and then it wouldn't leave my mind. I was like, I have to go back. I have to see that again. Like you said, David, not subtle in the slightest, but I love that about it. It's so in your face. It's just so in your face, but it's kind of like Andy also said, it kind of flips around with how unsubtle it is, but it kind of becomes great. Like all of these like really, really obvious like shots of just like the female body and everything, that if it was like a male director or something, would feel really like pervy and everything, but because it's got got like a female director, it feels so satirical, and it's just like, hey, here's like these leery shots, and oh my god, it's very, very funny. Demi Moore's amazing, and I hope she gets a nominee for like best actress, because she's great. Margaret Qualley is excellent too. She's having a great year. She was in Kinds of Kindness as well. And yeah, no, the third act, maybe one of the most bonkers things I've ever seen in a cinema. I kind of couldn't believe it kept going, because without getting into too many spoilers, there's a point in the film where you think it's wrapping up, and you're like, okay, so this is what the climax is going to be, and then you're like, oh no, that's not the climax. And then you're like, oh, okay, so this is the climax. And then you're like, no. And then it just keeps going. And it's like, some films fail to stick the landing.
Yeah.
But this one just has like, it sticks the landing, and then it jumps up, and then it sticks the landing again. It's absolutely.
And that final shot is just perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, maybe one of my favorite final shots of the year. It's been a great year for like final shots or final scenes in films, but the very final shot of this hasn't left my mind since I saw it. I love it. If Mubi release it over here on, well, I assume they're going to release it on 4K.
I think they might have. I don't know if they've announced it yet. I'm pretty. They will.
I'm sure it will be like a race to see who can cover that first for the site. Whoever covers it, I'm excited to read their take on it, because absolutely bonkers film. But yeah, that's my 10-6.
Cool. Right,
yes.
how are we doing? Yeah, this is going to take a while. I'll move on then and start doing my top 5. So one of these has already been mentioned, so I won't go on about it, but my number 5 is Hundreds of Beavers. I loved it. It's so much fun. I watched it quite recently on Blu-ray, but yeah, brilliant. Number 4 is All of Us Strangers. So this is one that it was kind of up for awards and things last year, but it didn't come out technically till 2024, and that really blew me away. It's just beautiful filmmaking, really powerful. And talk about final shots. That final shot for me, it's just really haunting. Like, it just stayed with me for ages. Yeah, beautiful film.
Absolute fantastic pick.
I'm gonna go through these a little quicker now, but you guys can talk more if you want. Because a lot of my top 5 are kind of films that were up for awards and things last year, so they kind of feel like they're well covered. But yeah, number 3, we've mentioned this earlier, but it's not been picked yet. It's Poor Things.
Yeah,
I adored Poor Things. It was just I do love Yorgos Lanthimos, if that's how you pronounce his name. Yeah, and this is keeping that standard up. As usual, I adore his films.
I really wish it had won Best Picture. I think it would have been a fantastic picture.
Yeah. It looks stunning. The performances are stunning. It's really funny. It's got a lot to say. It's thought provoking. It's just spot on for me. I absolutely loved it. Number 2 is Anora. Yeah, this is getting a lot of praise, and rightfully so. It is incredible. It's really long, but it's never boring. It's very funny. It's deeply moving by the end. That final sequence. Oh god, it's absolutely phenomenal. The way it kind of gradually it kind of, I don't know, evolve is the right word, but it kind of shifts in what's happening, and but kind of imperceptibly, but really effectively. And the performance is incredible. It's got some really, the characters are so strong in there as well. I love the I can't remember his name. The kind of
Igor.
Yeah. The kind of hard done by kind of assistant, and obviously he kind of grows as the film grows, and I absolutely adored this film. I loved every second of it. So I this is the one I want to go all the way and win the Oscar and all this kind of stuff. We shall see.
Yeah, I'm desperate to see it.
It's so good. I mean, I'm
a favorite now, because this was a favorite for a while, wasn't it? I think Conclave started to overtake it as the favorite, hasn't it?
Yeah. Although the Brutalist, I think, is a big one for best film, I think.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping Emilia Perez doesn't get it. I don't know if anyone else liked Emilia Perez.
I hated it.
So did I.
Well, the thing, I've not seen it, but I find it really weird that it's so up for all these awards, because the critics were pretty lukewarm on it. And if you look at like Letterboxd and things, the viewers don't seem to like it that much. I don't really understand why it's getting so much. It doesn't seem that popular. I don't understand.
It's kind of like, I have a film, and like you were talking about Will and Harper on your list, Andy.
Yeah.
It's kind of the complete complete inverse of what I assume that's going for, and a film
Yeah.
that does make my list. But talking about like the trans experience, it's just if anything, anything can win. Anything can win Best Picture. I don't mind as long as it's not Amelia Perez. It will set such a dangerous precedent going forward. I don't want it to.
I can't see it winning Best Film, but it's just going to walk away with Best Foreign Language. I know is it Foreign Language one? I think.
Yeah. It's like a mixed hybrid, but like it's mostly
Yeah, so it's going to walk away with that, I think.
There's a lot of speculation about whether Flow might get a nomination for Best International as well as Best Animated, isn't there?
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah, that would be amazing. Cool. Anyway, as I say, so Nora. Also, I've got to add that I'm a big Sean Baker lover. Though I've only recently started discovering his films, but I have never been disappointed.
No, he's fantastic.
Oh, he's amazing.
And it sounds like more of his early stuff's getting released in the US. I'm crossing my fingers it's going to come to UK as well.
I hope so.
But yeah, my number one, I didn't mention this is the one I want to win all the Oscars because it was up for last year's Oscars, and that's Zone of Interest. I put this at number one because I've never, leaving the cinema, it was one of the few times where it just changed me. Like the world seemed different when I left the cinema because of the way it's done. Just observing life around me was different because that whole film is just about kind of, it is like being almost a security camera, just observing life of this family who's the kind of patriarchal family is running the concentration camp, and it's really unique take on the kind of subject matter. It was so kind of like magnetically drawn to it in it, but it's so horrific, but it doesn't show the horror. Kind of it's just all implied. It's all in the background, other than a few little details that kind of literally drift through at some points. And as I say, it was just the impact on it was just like nothing else this year. So it had to make my number one. Really, it's stunning filmmaking.
That ended up in my honorable mentions, but it felt to me like a film that 10 years down the line I'll look back and say, yeah, that was one of the top 10 films of that year. I think it's just that I tend to at the end of a year I tend to often go towards films that I felt more sort of warmly towards, and I think this slow burn one that will across several rewatches will just really grow.
And technically as well, I mean the sound design's incredible. I'm glad I managed to catch it at the cinema, just because this again it's very subtle sound design, but it's so powerful. You've got that constant kind of hum of the kind of the furnaces and things in the background. It's just wow. Cool. So that's my top 10. So
great list.
Andy, you were next, I think.
Okay, right. So my number 5. Almost every year, I have an animated film that very few people have seen because I'm a big animation. And so my number 5 pick is A Greyhound of a Girl, which is this film that was produced across several different countries.
Wow.
But it's got a real. It's got a real Irish heart to it as well. With Kneecap in my top 10 as well, there's a very Irish flavour to my top 10. I won't say much about it because it's a film with a few little secrets embedded in there, but it's based on a children's book by Roddy Doyle, and it's just really brightly animated. It's warm and it's sad, and it's about 4 different generations of women kind of bonding. So it's really one, if you like animation and just a well-told story, it's definitely one to seek out. I won't spend long on my number 4 because it's Hundreds of Beavers.
I'm so happy to see it making so many lists.
The one thing I will flag up though is that Leon, it was your article that absolutely put it on my radar. And the minute I read that article, I was like, right, I've got to see this film. So I saw it as quickly as possible.
That makes me happy.
Like everyone says, I just go and see it. It's just brilliant. My number 3 is The Teacher's Lounge, which was that was up for Best International Oscar last year, but it's a film that it's maybe better not to know too much about going in, but it's all set in a school, and it's set around, there's been like a spate of thefts and they're trying to find out who did it, but the way the staff and approach that subject becomes a real kind of moral bone of contention. So even though it's quite sort of it's quite sort of basic setup. It becomes this really morally complex thing. It reminded me a lot of Asghar or Hardy films, like A Separation, where there's no sort of clear cut moral viewpoint. It keeps you on your toes all the way through, and it gets the sort of energy of a thriller by the end of it. It's so it's such a good film. I was really impressed by it. Number 2 is another animation, Robot Dreams, which was
nice.
I need to see that.
up for best animated feature last year, and I think it should have won, because it's a really kind of, again, it's bright and colourful, but it's got this kind of tragic heart underneath it, and it's really kind of incisive about kind of relationships and loss and moving on, and it's got a brilliant use of the Earth, Wind and Fire song September, which will like be stuck in your head for ages after you see it. And my number 1, Leon, you're going to love this. It's The Holdovers.
No, I'm happy you like it.
I like The Holdovers.
I think last time on together, you made your feelings clear, right? And I said, I'm going to be watching it soon.
Might be the top of your least favourite.
It's not everyone's cup of tea, but it's just, it really is my sort of thing. It's got that, obviously, it's got that 70s feel to it, and it's just like a real sort of zoned in on a small group of characters, and really sort of gets inside their experiences and the characters. I thought Paul Giamatti was just brilliant in it. I would have given him the Oscar in a heartbeat for his performance. And again, it's you can see it's sort of been embraced already as a sort of Christmas classic, because people are already watching it for the second time this year. I mean, it came out in January over here, which was weird because it was such an obvious Christmas release. I can only imagine it was just held up or something. But yeah, people have already embraced it as something to watch over the holiday period. And yeah, I just thought it was great. So that's mine.
Cool. Okay, Justin. Oh, was it? It was Justin next, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was me. As I said, I he's a bit of a random.
No worries. It's good to throw some different titles in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I saw Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which again I wasn't really expecting too much from it, and I'd missed the previous one, Ghostbusters Afterlife, so I was kind of pleasantly surprised that it was sort of real crowd pleaser. I mean, again, it was ticking a few boxes, and I don't think they should bring any of the old characters back in future. I think if they do another Ghostbusters, they should just stick with the new blood, as it were. But I really quite enjoyed it. The visual effects are very good. The acting was decent, and there was quite a lot of gags that actually worked for a change. So yeah, I thought it was a good, blockbuster, if you like. Generally, I was quite pleased with that one. One film which I wanted to mention, which I've kind of just remembered, so I'm going to stick this as my number 4. Is one which is called Standing on the Shadows of Kitties, which is a Trailer Park Boys, is like a folk bluesgrass band, and it's basically about their origins. And we got invited to the premiere last year. It's just actually at cinemas now. It's just kind of called in a limited release, but because we saw it last year, I've stuck it in last year. But I wasn't really expecting that much from it, but it was incredibly funny. Again, it sounds a bit like your Hundreds of Beavers, very, very sort of very low budget, micro budget, although it does have quite a few cameos from people like Ronnie Wood from Rolling Stones, Billy Bob Thornton. So there are some names in there, but they're not big, they're not spending a lot of time. And but yeah, if you get a chance to see it at a local cinema, it's worth seeing. But I think it will just probably mostly just go straight to a streaming service somewhere. But it's a shame because I think it deserves a few accolades because it is very funny. And if you like music and you like the way, if you're into funny films about bands and about music and about, shall we say, musical creative differences, then you'll get a lot out of this one.
I guess Spinal Tap is like my second favorite film of all time, so this is Spinal Tap. So it sounds like my kind of thing. I have to check it out.
Yeah, so it was quite surreal being in the same audience as Ronnie Wood. I was laughing at the same time he was, so that was fun. Next one I think I would go for would be June Part 2. I saw June Part 1 back last January at a friend's house, and then I thought, well, it was worth a look going to see Part 2, and I just was blown away by the visuals. Really, I mean, every other scene is like a painting. You could just freeze it and stick it on your wall, sort of thing. I mean, obviously the acting and that was okay, but visually it's just stunning. And I did get into it more than the first one. The first one is a lot of exposition, a lot of world building.
Yeah.
The second one, they kind of pressed on with the story a bit, and it was more satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, it was just outside my top 10 actually. I like June Part 2 a lot. It was really spectacular, kind of visually, definitely big screen kind of experience. It was as you say, absolutely stunning. But I liked it a lot. I enjoyed it a great deal. Yeah, definitely.
Another film that got a cinema release last year, but I only just got around to watching it, was Oddity.
I just saw you spotted your review just earlier. I've sent it on.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed that. It was very quirky, quite different. Obviously, it sort of picks up on various myths and legends like the Golem, and obviously the director writer must be quite a fan of authors like Arthur Machen and sort of. I'm trying to think the name I was sort of the tip of my tongue. Anyway, I think it's M.R. James is the author I was thinking of. So it's kind of old-fashioned horror, but with a bit of a modern twist. Nice. And I really enjoyed it, and some very good performances. So I think that has to be in my top 10. Cool. Also, talking about surprises, I was pleasantly surprised by The Beekeeper right at the beginning of the year with Jason Statham. I thought it was just very basic and that, but it was a lot of fun. And I think they've already greenlit a sequel, which will probably be out later this year, if not beginning next year. Apparently it did extremely well at the box office, breaking quite a few records, much to everyone's surprise, really. It obviously did something right, and I just found it just a blast. It was very entertaining. I don't know where I am. Am I on number 1 yet? Or
I'm not sure now.
I'll say I'll mention 2 other films. One was Furiosa, Mad Max.
Oh yes, again that was just outside my top 10. It was 11 actually,
which is just amazing to look at, and the action sequences are brilliantly done by George Miller and the stunt crew. And it's very difficult to fault that. I mean, a little bit too similar, I think, to the previous one, Fury Road, in some ways. Just the look and some of the stunts, but again, it's just it's just cinema, isn't it? It's just something you have to see on a big screen and just immerse yourself in.
Yeah, I was gonna say I actually got more involved in the story than the first one. I think I don't know. I prefer the first one in terms of spectacle, but I got more into the characters and the story with the second one.
Or
the fourth and the fifth one, or whichever one you call them. They kind of feel like their own beast, don't they? But I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
And also, I wanted to mention Deadpool and Wolverine, just as just sheer entertainment, lots and lots of jokes, and I quite like the fact he keeps breaking the fourth wall, and you just think, oh god, he's doing this again, but it's still very funny, and he manages to get away with it. So I do admire that sort of ability they've got of doing that, because it shouldn't really work, but it does. So again, it's one of these films. I don't know whether it belongs in any top 10, but it just seemed, it was quite a strong contender. It's one of the funniest films of the year.
Well, yeah, if you enjoy it, then you enjoy it. That's
so, so I guess that's probably me wrapping up.
Nice. Great list. Well, Leon, then what's your top 5?
Okay. So number 5, and in many ways, I feel like I want to push this up, but I'm going to keep it at number 5 right now, because I'd probably say it's the biggest surprise of the year for me, and that is the Robbie Williams biopic Betty. I had little to no interest in this one. I mean, it's directed by the guy who made The Greatest Showman, which I wasn't a fan of, and I mean, Robbie Williams. I mean, everyone in England knows him, but I wouldn't say like I'm a diehard Robbie fan or anything, but I I'd heard really strong word of mouth, and I was like, you know what, I'll give it a shot. Went to it, and I was absolutely floored by it. The film utilizes its gimmick. For those of you who don't know, the entire film is like a biopic of Robbie Williams' like rise to fame, but he's played by another actor, but he's portrayed as a chimpanzee or a monkey throughout the entire film, like a CG monkey, similar to like the recent Planet of the Apes films and everything. No characters ever mention that he's a monkey. It's the way Robbie sees himself, a bit of a rebel, a bit of a monkey, a bit wild and everything, and really works in terms of like the themes of the film and everything. But no, the musical biopic is a genre that can be very tired. I mean, we were just talking about Kneecap being one that kind of gives it like a kick up the ass in terms of like originality, but Better Man, well, it does adhere to some of the formulas. The stresses of fame and like the drugs and all of that stuff. It does it in such a way that's so open and so sincere, which I rarely see from biopics. I mean, I feel like a lot, particularly with musicians and artists who are still alive, like Bohemian Rhapsody or some like Straight Outta Compton, they'll kind of tidy it up a little bit and make sure it's a little bit cleaner and hide out some elements. But Better Man just absolutely, it shows you the dark parts of Robbie's life. It doesn't hold back, and in many ways, it kind of portrays him in a fairly negative light at points, but you kind of understand why. Like, you understand like why somebody would act this way. And yeah, no, I thought the musical set pieces were absolutely fantastic. I mean, there were a handful of musicals this year and musical themed films in the mainstream, but I think this probably had the best musical set pieces. There's one about halfway through the film, a bit before halfway through, set to his song Rock DJ, which is absolutely just mind-blowing. Like, the choreography, it's all in one unbroken take. There's probably some digital trickery there, but like absolutely just like bonkers. It's something that as soon as I got out, I was like, I just want to see that again. So I hope it gets a good physical release, because it bombed massively.
I know, it's a shame. Like, I realize in America Robbie Williams isn't much of a big deal, but I was really surprised it didn't do better in the UK, because I must admit I watched it after your I saw you recommend it on Facebook, and so I actually watched it. I mean, I usually do not like biopics. Especially the musical ones, they tend to hit the same kind of beats, and I'm just not usually a fan. But after your recommendation, I thought, oh, I'll give it a try, and because the reviews in general are really strong for it. I was like, I've got a limitless card. I'm not paying for it. I've already paid for my cinema going, so I'm going to give it a shot. And I liked it way more than I expected to. It didn't mind me a top 10. I think it still hit too many of the kind of biopic beats that I'm not a fan of.
Fair.
But at the same time, absolutely, just what you said, it felt really honest, way more than like the likes of Bohemian Rhapsody, which I didn't like really at all. Other than the final scene, which is awesome, everything else is awful. It really got it right, and I think weirdly, I think because the gimmick, it's weird that the whole gimmick of him being a kind of an ape, it kind of, as you say, it never really mentions it. It's just there, which can make it almost feel very gimmicky. But at the same time, in a weird way, it made it feel more like it was Robbie Williams in a weird way. Because it wasn't an act, because it wasn't an obvious act. It wasn't Rami Malek pretending to be him with some makeup on. That's really off-putting, because you know it's someone else. Like like when like Will Smith did Ali and stuff like that, you know it's Will Smith, even if he's doing a good accent or whatever. Whereas this, because it was like, okay, this is something completely different, this is not a human, it felt more like you felt like you were watching Robbie Williams in a weird way. And because he was involved in the production of it again, so it really felt much more personal, like you say, and so it felt much more kind of raw, even though it was this crazy kind of musical with CGI monkeys and stuff. It felt more raw and more real in a really strange way. So I loved it for that. It was just, as I say, the only thing that held me back from really loving it was it still kind of fell into these usual kind of like cliches. But you know, I'm glad you had it in your list. As I say, it was way better than I expected it to be.
No, I'm so glad you checked it out. I'm really happy. Yeah, no, I just absolutely blown away by it. It probably like made me cry more than any film this year. I think it's got like a really strong third act, like some really like hard hitting stuff. Especially like I can relate to some elements in the past year or so. I think it just like it set off the for right, like it's set up for right things, and I was like, oh, this is yeah, no, absolutely loved it. Yeah, no, Better Man, please see it if it even sounds even remotely interesting on like VOD. I hope it gets a Blu-ray here. I'm really worried it's gonna get like DVD only or like digital only because of how much it bombed. But I'm just please get a DVD, Blu-ray or something. Number 4. Okay, this is probably gonna be the most. I don't know if I want to say contentious because I know I know a lot of people don't like this one, but I was head over heels for it, and that's M. Night Shyamalan's Trap, his latest thriller. I never used to be a huge M. Night fan, but over the recent, like the last couple of years, I've kind of dived into his work, reevaluated some of it, and even when he doesn't like completely knock it out of the park for me, I really admire the man's ambition. I really admire his dedication to just making something for himself, really, but audiences can go and enjoy too. It's just something he loves filmmaking. You can tell he likes these goofy stories and the twists and all of that. And I think Trap is probably one of his best films, which I don't know if many people would agree, but I was absolutely just like enthralled from start to finish. It's so fun. The premise, for those of you who don't know, Josh Hartnett plays a dad who's taking his daughter to a concert, kind of like a Taylor Swift-esque character in the film. She's got a sold-out show and everything, but he notices there's loads of like police around the concert. He's like, oh, what's going on here? He asks a guy who's working at the concert, and he's like, oh yeah, the killer, the butcher, the guy who's killing everyone around, he bought a ticket to this concert, so this whole concert's a trap for him. But the kicker is the dad is the killer, and I'm not ruining like a third act twist. That is in the trailer, opening like 10-15 minutes of the film. So you're basically following this really lovable dad who's also a serial killer, and you want him to escape, but you're like, he's also a bad person. And M. Night really blends like so much humor into the film that I just absolutely loved. Like, it's really comical. It's kind of a farce in so many ways. Like, it's very silly. There's so much kind of like stuff you could kind of nitpick if you really wanted to, but I just thought the cinematography was absolutely fantastic. I forget the director of photography's name, but he's the same guy who shot Challengers and Queer by Luca Guadagnino recently. So if you liked the look of those films, you'll absolutely love this. Shot on 35mm. It's honestly one of the best looking films of the year. But no, just a stellar lead performance by Josh Hartnett. So fun, so just like, I don't know, confident. Kind of feels like a throwback to like De Palma thrillers of like the 90s. Think of like Snake Eyes, something like that.
You had the look of that in the trailer. I must admit, it made me think of Snake Eyes when I saw the trailer. I've not seen the film.
I
must admit, because I'd read about the premise of it, it did sound interesting, but the reviews kind of put me off. But now I'm thinking, actually, I might give it a try. Like,
it's so much fun. I think Josh Hartnett gives, like, people criticize M. Night's direction sometimes with actors and dialogue in particular, but Josh Hartnett is one of the few people who can make the kind of I don't want to say wonky, but just like off-kilter dialogue from an M. Night film just work. Like, he's so into it that it's kind of like it's impossible to look away from him, really. Like, one of my favorite performances of the year. It's an absolute blast, and it's also just really endearing because the artist, the concert that they're going to see, the musician, is played by M. Night's daughter in real life. Salika, I think her name is. It's basically a bit of, I guess you could say, like a vanity project, because she made like an album's worth of songs and then she's performing them at the concert in character. But she's a pretty talented musician, so it's cool to see like him kind of propping up his daughter. And there's a lot you can kind of read into it in a meta way, as because obviously the film's about a father taking his daughter to the concert, and then like M. Night's putting his own daughter in the film. There's a lot you can read into it as like fatherhood and stuff, which I found really like heartwarming and compelling, which is strange to say about a film about a serial killer. But absolute blast. I know a lot of people weren't huge on it. Again, like you said, critics weren't like head over heels for it, but I loved it. I've revisited it 3 times, and it got a 4K in America, everywhere apart from the UK, it seems. It just got a Blu-ray here, but I had to import a steelbook from Italy, I think it was Italy or something, because I was like, I need to own this in 4K. But no, amazing film. Number 3, so in my write-up for the end of year review, I did say that even though this is only number 3 for me, I feel like it's the one that will stand the test of time. You were speaking earlier about the zone of interest kind of of being like, you look back on that in hindsight and you're like, no, that's one of the best films of the year. This is like, in many ways, this probably is the best film of the year, but I have two more that I like a bit more that are personal favorites. But that is Jane Schoenberg's I Saw the TV Glow. So Jane Schoenberg, filmmaker, came out of the gate a few years ago with their film We're All Going to the World's Fair. Micro budget film made for a couple grand at most, maybe. Almost filmed entirely on just like a mobile phone and cameras, like desktop screens. And they got a big budget for their next film from A24, a couple of million. And yeah, no, this film is kind of a huge look into identity. You were saying with Will and Harper earlier, Andy. It's very, very much about the trans experience. The director themselves are transgender, and it basically follows a character played by Justice Smith who doesn't really feel like he belongs in the world, but really gets enamored by a fictional TV series called the Pink Opaque, which is very Buffy the Vampire Slayer Goosebumps-esque, like one of those 90s young adult shows with like tinges of horror. And he kind of bonds with another outsider at school over this show because they don't really have much in the way of friends, but they really get like caught up in watching every episode. And like it's the actual TV show is directed by like Jane created like a fictional TV show inside, and it feels so authentic to those like kind of 90s low budget kind of like young adult shows, and it really captures the aesthetic that has some really like horrifying visuals. Like there's one in particular with an ice cream man, which sounds silly, but you're looking at it and you're like, that is terrifying. But after a few years go by, the two kind of lose connection, but then reconnect and realize that the TV show might have meant more to them than initially expected. I don't want to say too much. It's one that I think you should really go into not knowing a great deal about. But if I had to compare it to anything, it's like maybe like the work of David Lynch. I mean, he recently passed away, but like I was thinking so much of Twin Peaks: The Return in a lot of it. I found it really, really just open, just unique, original. It's something that I think for like people who are like kind of discovering themselves right now, transgender people and stuff like that, I think it's going to be something that really resonates with them. And if I had to compare it to anything in terms of what I think it will be comparable to in the future, something like Donnie Darko maybe, where it has that audience, but it's got a very, very solid audience right now, but over time it's just going to grow into like one of those cult films that is just hailed as one of the best films of the generation. Yeah, no.
So I was just going to say, yeah, it's had I've had a lot of people talk about that. It's one I've been intrigued by, but I just never came across it. I don't think it played in cinemas over here, but where's it available in the UK?
So
do you know?
it's available digitally. It doesn't have a Blu-ray or a DVD here, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But A24 on their own website, they have a Blu-ray and a 4K that you can purchase from. But honestly, if you want to watch it, your best bet, unfortunately, and I hate to say this, is just probably buying it like on
Oh, right.
iTunes.
Is it like it's not on like one of those kind of streaming subscription sort of things?
No, not yet.
Rental?
No,
Okay.
like you can just buy it for now, but maybe it'll hit like one of the streamers soon. I know A24 have a good deal with Prime, so maybe it'll be on like Prime Video in a few months or something. But you know, it's one that I'm hoping the label gets over here because it, like one of my favorites from last year, Beau is Afraid. It's an A24 film, but Sony bought the distribution rights for the UK, but they kind of just dropped it. I think it had a few theatrical releases and then just went straight to digital, which is this exact same thing that happened with Beau is Afraid, which was my favorite of last year. It got dumped on iTunes, Apple TV, stuff like that, but you can't like buy a DVD or Blu-ray here of it, unfortunately. Yeah, no, amazing film. I wholeheartedly think it's just like one of the best films of the generation and one of the decade, sorry, and it will mean so much to so many people, especially like the younger people who are again like discovering themselves. It's so well made. It captures like vibes and aesthetic, like a specific type of aesthetic that I haven't seen since Twin Peaks: The Return. Really, incredible film.
I did actually see it, and
what did
to be
you
honest,
think?
I didn't. I don't think I registered it as much as I should have. But listen to you talk about it now. I'm already thinking, yeah, I want to go back because I thought, yeah, that's a really intriguing film, but I just didn't. Somehow I didn't quite put it together. But reading up about it afterwards and hearing you talk about it afterwards, and I did immediately think, I do want to go back and revisit that, because I found the quite subtle ending very intriguing,
Yes.
and I think that kind of helped me to put together a little bit more in retrospect what it was trying to do and what it was trying to say. And like you say, the authenticity of it's the sort of the sort of TV that I grew up with, and it doesn't feel like just a sort of hokey pastiche of that. It does feel like very authentically captured. So it's definitely one that I want to revisit.
Yeah.
Cool.
No, I really, really hope you like it a bit more on a rewatch, because it's one that, like, as soon as I watched it, it just wouldn't leave my mind, which is very ironic considering the nature, the whole premise of the film is a piece of media that's stuck on somebody's mind and they can't escape from. And it's just like, I felt that same way, and it's one of the best kind of depictions of, like, I don't want to say obsession with media, but just being like captured by something in particular, just like a film or a show or a book or anything that just like really impacts you in a way that like few things do. And no, I found it really, really empowering. A fantastic film. I'm praying it gets a good release over here at some point. My number 2, same as you, David, Honora. A huge, huge, huge Sean Baker head myself. Loved everything I've seen from him, and I was absolutely psyched. Like last year, Red Rocket made my list. I think it was like on my list last year. I thought that was absolutely brilliant, and I was like, how is he going to top that one? That one was like my favorite of his to that point, and then Honora comes and just like blows me away. A lot of what you said, it kind of, I love the performances. Igor in particular, he's just fantastic, but Mikey Madison as Annie is great. I love how it, like, again, like you said, it kind of switches up every so often. I see it very much as a film of 3/3. Like, you have this really kind of like glamorous, blitzy, just kind of like, I don't know, energetic chaos for the first section. It turns into a bit of a screwball comedy in the midsection, just absolutely gonzo, like just people making all of the wrong decisions you could ever imagine for. It's absolutely hilarious time. And then it just a gut punch of a final like section. But the final shot of that film is just haunting. I've watched it a handful of times already, and every time I watch it or I know somebody who's watched it, I'm just like, can we talk about that ending for a bit? Because it's something that it has stuck with me like few things this year. I really, really hope it gets some like it wins something at the Academy Awards, because again, like every element of it is perfect. It looks gorgeous. It sounds amazing. For a film that's like 2 hours 20 minutes, it flies by.
Absolutely,
Oh, it's just amazing. One of the best films of the year. Great. I know Criterion announced it's getting a US 4K Blu-ray recently. I don't know if we'll get it over here because that's Neon in the States and Universal over here, but I'll be importing that if it doesn't get a release by Universal over here. And then my number 1, and I was going back and forth because Honora could have made my number 1 for a long time, but I had to decide on Luca Guadagnino's Challengers, a film that completely caught me by surprise because I haven't been a huge fan of Luca's past work. I think some of it's good. Call Me By Your Name's decent, and I liked Bones and All quite a bit, but I've never loved some of his films, and I think his Suspiria remake is absolutely terrible. One of my like least favorite like remakes I think I've seen, but I know it has its fans, but yeah, it's just he's a filmmaker that's never like fully connected for me. But with Challengers, I was just like, from moment 1 to the very last frame, I was hooked instantly. It has such this I don't know, it's such a chaotic kind of energy from the very first frame. It's basically a love triangle kind of film, a bit of like an erotic film in ways, but not so much, and mostly like a drama centered around 3 people. It's centered around Tashi, Patrick, and why am I forgetting his other name? Anyway, 3 people, and these 2 guys have basically fell in love with Tashi Duncan, played by Zendaya, who is a very, very famous, very prolific tennis player. And over the course of, I think it's like a 17, 18-year period, because the film's going back and forth in time constantly, you get to see what led them to this like big kind of final tennis match. It's like the final match in a Challengers tournament, where whoever wins this wins the whole tournament. So it's centered around that, but you're going back in time every so often to learn more pieces about the history of each of these people people and how they kind of got entangled together. So at first you'll be watching it and you'll be like, oh, I want this guy to win because he seems really nice. And then 10 minutes later, you'll learn something and you're like, oh no, he seems a bit naff. I don't like him anymore. And then you'll learn something else. And the film just keeps going back and forth, ironically, like a tennis match where it's just like the ball's going one way to another. And it's just something that's so high energy throughout I think it's like a 2:15 runtime or something, 2 hours 15 minutes. But it's like absolutely just like it's just impossible to look away from. It has this amazing score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross of like Nine Inch Nails fame, which is very kind of like electronic and very like hyperactive almost. It's almost like you're like in a club for the entire film, basically. Just this really high paced, high energetic, like high energy music, that is utilized throughout not only the tennis matches but also through some of the big kind of dramatic arguments. Like two characters will have like a dispute or something, and you'll have this blaring like techno music over it, which sounds like such a bizarre choice, but it really works in terms of how heated these situations are. Yeah, no, it's just something that absolutely blew me away. I've seen it like 5 or 6 times this year. I keep going back to it. I'm like, it almost feels like a drug. It's like I'm like, oh, I'm missing it. I want to go back and see it again. I want to go back for seconds. It's so energetic. It's such a blast, and has probably like in terms of like Hall of Fame, like great finales, like little final 5, 10, 20 minutes or something. It reminded me so much of Damien Chazelle's Whiplash, if anybody's seen that, and just the amazing like final 15-10 minute stretch of that film. It's like up there as something that I think it will go down as like one of the great endings of all time. I think it's just absolutely fantastic. If you can't tell, I loved it. But yeah, there's my top 10.
Cool, excellent. Yeah, that's one that I think we talked about this before. It looks like the sort of film that I probably won't like, but at the same time, there are a lot of people who love it. I need to give it a try. It might surprise me.
I think it.
I just have something against the kind of toxic relationship films, and I don't know, they annoy me so as well.
No, that's very fair. That's very fair.
Yeah, I did see it, David, and I felt like that. I wasn't keen on it, I'm afraid. It does seem like one that might be worth going and seeing again, especially after hearing Leon describe it like that again. But yeah, that does annoy me a little bit. That whole love triangle, toxic relationship.
No, that's fair.
Cool. Well, we've spent ages on these new films, but that's good. I think it's good. It kind of needed to. It felt right. Okay, that's the end of the first half of the show. So check out the second part of the show to hear about our favourite physical releases and our favourite first-time watchers. Thanks for listening.